Moderator of the conference is Aqib Sabir, and he's also a PhD scholar in the Department of English. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the virtual mic.
I think there's some problem with Farhana's network.
Yes,
right? She logged out. Shall I take over?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you to the organizers, including Farhana. Okay, she's joining back. Yeah. So thank you, Farhana, now that she's here. And hello and welcome to the 5th session of the Young Researchers Conference 2024. This is also the first session on day 2. And in this session, which is titled Transnational Trajectories, Cataclysmic Hauntings, and Mnemonic Complexity in War Narratives, we have 3 presenters. And in the chair, we have our own Jubi C. John. Welcome, Jubi. Let me just quickly read out the bio note of our chair. Jubi C. John is a PhD scholar at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia. She is the co-editor of the forthcoming volume, Effective World Making, Rooting Planetary Thought, published by Routledge. Previously, she has delivered lectures at the University of Delhi and Jamia Millia Islamia. Welcome, Jubi, to the session, and good to see you.
Thank you, Aqib, for that very warm welcome. I'm very happy to be here, and I really want to thank the organizers for making me a part of this conference. Without any further delay, so let's start with the first presentation. We have Dr. Huzaifa Pandit, who is an assistant professor of English at Government Degree College, Pampur University of Kashmir. For his PhD, he worked on establishing a comparison between Faiz Ahmad Faiz, Agha Shahid Ali, and Mahmoud Darwish under the rubric of Poetics of Resistance at University of Kashmir. His first book, Green is the Color of Memory, Hawakal Publishers, was published as the winning manuscript of Rhythm Divine Poets Chapbook Contest 2017. So over to you, Dr. Pandit, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Just before you begin, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make a few things clear that each participant has 20 minutes for the presentation and 5 minutes for the discussion. I'll let each presenter know when they are in the 18th minute of their presentation so that we do not overshoot time. And secondly, Jubi, just please let me know if you would want the discussion to happen after individual presentations or collectively at the end.
I think we can do the discussion right after the presentation, and if we have time by the end too, yeah.
All right. So all the participants would be requested to post their questions in the chat box, and they will be taken to the presenters at the end of their presentation. So Dr. Pandit, you are welcome to begin your presentation.
Right. So my title of my paper is Maps of Coffee, Diasporas of Trauma in Selected Poems of Mahmoud Darwish. Basically, the paper tries to argue that Darwish's poetry doesn't fall within the traditional paradigms of diasporic poetry because it represents what is called a forced diaspora, not a diaspora by choice. And therefore, I wish to, dwell on the condition of exile, not from the privileged outposts of hybridity and assimilation, but from the routine of fragmentation and exclusion. And in turn, I want to therefore talk about how it emerges as a revised definition of resistance poetry, which opens the varied possibilities by exploring memory and resistance in subjugated populations. It's a longish paper, so I'll read only excerpt from the paper. And rather than beginning from where I have begun, I'll basically talk about simply that from here, that when Darwish started his poetry, he wrote in the tradition of Adab al-Iltizam, or committed literature, and wrote poems like the legendary Identity Card, or I Long for My Mother's Coffee. espousing the Palestinian cause, depicting the anger and trauma of Palestinians, and promising redemption through his poetry. However, after the Arab Israel war led to the complete routing of Arab forces and the strengthening of Israeli narratives, so what happened? These factors and the fresh threat of imprisonment prompted Darwish to leave Palestine in 1970 and accept a scholarship in Moscow. So I've quoted a line from a paragraph from Khalid Matawa's book on Darwish, wherein he provides a clear account of the circumstances that forced Darwish to leave Palestine. He says Darwish's fifth and last imprisonment in Israel created a qualitatively different threat to his sense of agency because this time around the Israeli authorities detained him in a case which was linked to terrorism, and therefore a separate set of laws would have applied to him, and he would have been his temporary detention would have been renewed endlessly. So as a result, when forced with this permanent loss of freedom in 1971, Darwish arrived at Cairo, accepting an invitation to work with the newspaper Al Ahram. And then he relocated to Beirut to work with Yasser Arafat at PLO's Center for Palestinian Studies. After the invasion of Beirut in 1982, he went to Paris, where he edited the journal Al Kamal, the leading Palestinian and cultural review, and finally returning to Ramallah, Palestine in 1995. So, what happens as a result of this movement, transition from Palestine to Beirut to Paris and back again? This whole cycle makes him a psalmist of exile, and he is preoccupied with exploring and versifying the diasporic Palestinian subject. But his poetry tries to portray the disfiguration of identity after loss of homeland, which I shall try to portray through a few selected poems. The first poem I have taken is As Fate Would Have It, which was dedicated to the Palestinian poet Rashid Hussein. It's an elegy which is written for Hussein, who died in a fire in his apartment far away from Palestine in New York. But in doing so, he becomes like Faz, who, when he mourned his friend, he not only mourned his friend, but also mourned the loss of a dream, of a homeland. So when he says, this elegy is an elegy for the loss of a homeland and the Palestinian identity. The poem begins with the account of two exiles meeting in faraway Fifth Avenue, New York, and as it was, the conversation immediately veers to homeland and its loss. So the poem quoted on Fifth Avenue, he greeted me and burst into tears. He leaned against a wall of glass. New York is without willows. He made me cry, and water returned to its rivers. We had coffee, and too soon went separate ways. Now, the first thing to be noticed here is that a clear binary has been established between the metropolitan as well as the homeland. Okay? Homeland is viewed in terms of something that doesn't exist in New York. So, what does it point out here? It says here the walls of the metropolitan are made of glass, so which are transparent, so that the boundaries between in and out automatically are blurred. The boundaries fail to hold, unlike home, which is an identity which delineates yourself and your identity, and the void created from absence of home haunts. So, what is interesting to note here is that the act of crying, he made me cry, and the water returned to its rivers, restores the water to the rivers, indicating the restoration of home, the natural order. That is, it's an indication, therefore, of the sheer emotional displacement of the Palestinian subject that every emotion is repressed and only surfaces when some sign of home appears. Drinking of coffee, too, is an act of restoration, a reenactment of a cultural memory of home. However, this restoration can't last long, and too soon the friends go separate ways, reenacting the first exile from home. In exile, creating home then means doubling of exile, and the doubly traumatic void emerges, which casts its shadow on every day and everything. Therefore, what emerged from this poem is a dulling routine of recollection and lamenting, as time seems to stand still. For 20 years, the poem says, I have known him to be 40. So that means for the Palestinian in exile, memory is a catalogue of events and objects forever frozen in memory, as Rashid's poems were preoccupied solely with Palestine and its loss, and he devoted a week for the homeland, a day for the invaders, and a time for my mother to sigh. So, in these poems, read over 20 years, he relived his trauma in an endless cycle as he sought to remedy the original the original wound, the loss of Palestinian prestige and land. So I quote again, he says, we were heartbroken by the black eyes of the assailant. We fought and were killed, then we fought again. Curious to note here, Darwish conflates the second person singular he with first person plural we to indicate the blurring of the two. Rashid's testimony is the testimony of whole Palestine, indicating that Palestine lives in a state of perpetual exile from itself. In this state, Rashid seeks a new idiom, a new language, to express the impossibility of moving forward, where the past is not only to be marked clearly in light of today and tomorrow, but is also continuously effaced. From cafe to cafe, in search of another language, to tell the difference between memory and hell, searching for my original limbs, I need my arms to embrace and my wings and sail. Why does the ode abandon my heart as soon as I leave Jaffa? Every time I embrace Jaffa, she fades. No, it's not my time yet. So the cafe emerges as a liminal space where exile is relived, an absolute and total non-place that articulates the fundamental condition of homelessness and placelessness. And lost and unnoticed in the crowd of cafes, the Palestinian seeks a refuge from a deep and powerful emotional conflict, seeking to return the Palestinian back to home. Seeking his original limbs entails a paralysis, both figurative and literal. So, first, the sustained and strategic demolition and erasure of Palestinian landscape, that's called domicide. The, the Palestinian subject has no recourse to return to the pre 1948 Palestine, the original or undispersed locus. So the nation is therefore perpetually scattered and sought to be gathered across cafes and different diasporic lands. So the abandonment of the old and the elusive Jaffa nature of Jaffa signifies the spring of history into present, of inability of Nakba to pass into time as history, something that has happened in the past, because it's indistinguishable from the present, where Nakba continues to be enacted every day. So this rearticulation prevents any progress in time. So the Palestinian subject is stuck in a stagnant mode of loss, ever stuck with the possible past, with no possibility of future. Rashid points to this mode of mourning, this indefinite deferment of the law of return against forcible disposition and disenfranchisement and containment. He says, I don't dream of anything now. I desire only to desire. I dream only of desiring harmony. To desire or to vanish, no, it's not my time yet. So similarly, just like the cafe, the airport emerged as another space where the Palestinians gather, but a space again which is located beyond time. Right? A year later, we met at Cairo airport. After 30 minutes, he said, I wish I were free in the prison in Nazareth. So the apparently oxymoronic freeing from searching for freedom in a land at an airport and wishing for prison, an airport which signifies movement, an airport which signifies mobility, and to wishing for freedom of a prison. So this oxymoronic irony and oxymoronic idea, which is ironic as well, indicates the horrors of this paradise existence where a prison retails the feeling of home. Along with fellow prisoners, a sense of community is forged inside the prison, which creates the illusion of home. But in diaspora, the community is too scattered to let any sense of community evolve, and the Palestinian tragedy has no takers. In Egypt, the contours of the Palestinian problems are set within the universal quote unquote universal question of class struggle rather than settler colonialism, possession and imperial aggression, which erases the peculiarities and complexity of the Palestinian problem and complicated further by the need to find an answer to the Jewish question to resolve itself. So both united apart from geographical proximity, not only by geographical proximity, but also a shared tradition of religion and exile. Darwish reminds the reader of this betrayal of the shared and close Abrahamic tradition that shapes their imagining of respective nations. What I'm basically alluding to is that since the Jews were the original exile, were the people in original exile, and the shared uh, mythology and the shared history between Muslims and the Jews. So the whole historical tradition, that's what is being talked about here. Who among the infidel prophets led you so to distance yourself? They didn't love us as we had hoped they would. They didn't love us, but they did acknowledge us. This reminder of the effacement of this betrayal in Egypt is all the more ironic because the original Jewish narrative of exile begins from Egypt, from Moses and the people of Bani Israel moving away from the tyranny of Pharaoh. Hence, the Palestinians rely not only just on discourses that erode specificities, but turn to a far more reliable witness, the River Nile, to testify their condition. I depend on the
Dr.
Nile,
Pandit,
he
I'm
said.
sorry to interrupt. Please try to wind up in 2 minutes.
All right, just I'll quote and here. I depend on the Nile, he said. The Nile is faithful. I said, the Nile has a memory of steel and not as shallow as we thought. So basically, what I'm really talking about is, use of various images I have examined in this poem. So I'm trying to look at how Darwish is engaged in a project of redrawing maps, how he uses myth, tradition, and legend to not just question the nation, the loss of a nation, but also question the very existence of this practice of nation making. And that is where true resistance of Darwish lies. He doesn't merely mourn the loss of a land, but he also quite interrogates how nations are thought of, how nations are conceived, and what are the instruments that are used of in making nations. And by using them as counter to the very idea of nation making, he points out the fractures manifest in such a practice and therefore evolves as another paradigm of resistance poetry. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandit, for that really enlightening presentation. I think you've given us a lot to think about in terms of exile and home. And I think we'll move on to questions now and then move on to the next presentation. Yeah. So Dr. Pandit, my question to you is that you used a term called memoricide also, which means the killing of memory.
Yes.
Right. And we've often
Memoricide and domicide.
Yeah. So, and we've often seen that it is within regimes, it's very important for this memoricide to happen. So then resistance poetry is something that shows the resilience of the targeted or the marginalized population. Do you think, why do you think it is so important for killing of memory to happen?
The answer is
population.
Because, as I think it was Foucault who said, whoever controls memory, whoever controls this ability to recall and to recall what happened and how it happened, to name, it is they who control the narrative. So, unless and until you have memory of what happened, they say those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. If you are removed, if that memory is removed from you, you not only lose a sense of history, but also how that history has shaped the present. You become a sort of rootlessness. That's why it's very important to preserve this memory against all. And that's why every project, every imperial project has forever been so interested in history. Because if you control the past, you are controlling not just your sense of what happened, but also the sense of who you are and what you aspire to be. That's why I think it is very important to counter memory side, because it's actually you're countering this whole identity project. And identity is the locus of what is being contested. If you control it, then resistance is futile. Then there's nothing to resist against. Resistance emerges when you believe strongly in some sort of identity. That is lost, then everything is lost.
Right. Thank you so much. I think, do we have more questions?
Yes, we have one more question from, in fact, we have two more questions. This first question is from Zara. Being a poet yourself, how far do you justify the manipulation of the content by the so-called journalistic institutions who pretend to be supportive of free press? Could you please explain it, keeping in view the present Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, being a poet yourself, how far do you justify the manipulation of the content by the so-called journalistic institutions?
I got it. I got the question. Difficult question to answer because of the word manipulation. After all, what text isn't manipulated? What can't be manipulated? When there are words, words will need to be interpreted. By themselves, any event will mean nothing. All right, it will all exist in the sphere of interpretation. As for therefore manipulation, when we say of manipulation, we have to be very and careful of what we label as manipulation and what we don't label as manipulation. Is manipulation something that doesn't agree with our version of events, or is manipulation something that panders to the opposite side? So the question is that it is very hard to defend or to even point out what manipulation is. But if I got the just right, if you're saying how difficult it is, how do I justify manipulation? Um, as a poet or even as a reader, one must be wary of not following straight-jacketed narratives. That's what I can say here. That one must be careful not to follow black and white narratives, but to look more closely into history and to look more closely into beyond into humanitarian narratives, so as to speak. And if we have lost sense of that history, of that looking at things in as a human problem, also as a historical problem. And if you just view things merely as a textual problem, as something to be reported without looking into the politics of it or without looking into the specificities of it, then of course it is unjustifiable. Then it's unjustifiable. So the answer to your question is that I hope that uh, whoever looks at poetry or whoever looks at literature from marginalized communities looks at them with a view of trying to understand them in their totality rather than taking very narrow and straight-jacketed versions of history into account.
Thank you.
That's what.
Sorry for interrupting. I hope you were done making that point, and because there's
Yes,
one more
I
question
was.
that we wanted to come quickly to, and this is a question from Professor Nishad Zaidi. I'm reading out the question, but ma'am, you are most welcome to please unmute yourself and speak if you want to add something to it. The question that she has typed here is: in this history of loss and geography of displacement, what role does literature have? What kind of habitus does it provide? And also, you are
Oh,
requested to keep your answer brief, right?
right. Oh, I think the whole project that I have embarked on is a testimony to the its importance. I'll just quote one example which will explain why it's very important. When Israel invaded Beirut, the first thing they attacked was PLO and its archives. That itself demonstrates that they viewed it as something that was nullifying or countering their existence. Literature is an alternate memory, an alternate history. It goes back to my first point that you asked. Literature is a way to preserve the memory. And if you don't have literature, where else will you find these histories of loss and mourning, especially in a time where, to quote the second journalists, manipulate the whole narrative? So I think literature has an immense testifying and immense role of archiving the whole history of loss and geography, mapping it out. Right.
Great.
I'll keep
Thank
it
you so much.
brief.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandit. I think this was really enlightening. I think we should be having the discussion about memory and exile and home in these current times as well. So without further ado, we'll move on to the next presenter. We have Sheikh Sana Asad, who is a PhD scholar at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Her primary area of research is trauma and memory studies. She attended the University of Heidelberg, Germany for a semester as a Spark Fellow in the year 2022. And her paper is titled Harmonies of Subversion, Exploring Kashmiri Songs as Sonic Archives. So over to you, Sana.
Soumya, if you could unmute Sana.
Thank you, Soumya. So the title of my presentation is Harmonies of Subversion, Exploring Kashmiri Songs as Sonic Archives. Again, this is a working paper, and I'll also be cutting a lot of stuff from what I've written, so I would really love these suggestions. Kashmir, ensnared in the geopolitical disputes between post-colonial nation states, notably India and Pakistan, has become a pivotal subject within the geopolitical discourses of South Asia. Over the past 2 decades, the region has witnessed a surge in violence and unrest rooted in historical tensions and territorial disputes surrounding the region. This tumultuous backdrop has had profound psychological ramifications on the populace, creating a complex landscape that extends beyond the geopolitical arena. During this era, mental health professionals have encountered an unprecedented surge in individuals displaying identifiable symptoms of trauma. In her noteworthy anthropological study titled The Occupied Clinic, Saiba Verma examines the psychological repercussions of the conflict in Kashmir, characterizing the resulting impact as an epidemic of trauma. Other studies also indicate a substantial escalation in psychiatric morbidity attributable to the prolonged conflict in Kashmir, especially over the past 18 years. Now, in the backdrop of this, what the last 2 decades have also witnessed is the maturation of a generation that has grown up amidst perpetual conflict, thereby manifesting distinctive characteristics in their lifestyles and a notable heightened political consciousness. This quote-unquote new political generation, to quote Milkman, in Kashmir has not merely inherited, but also adapted a new language of dissent, imprinting upon it their unique memories and experiences related to the Kashmir conflict. This generation not only bears the weight of its own fresh traumas, but it's also interpellated by the enduring legacy of transgenerational trauma. This trauma finds varied expression, with a particular intriguing manifestation being observed in the cultural production. This paper aims to scrutinize a specific manifestation of this trauma experience, namely through the medium of music production in the context of Kashmir. The paper delves into the profound impact of Kashmiri musical renditions as not only sites of resistance, but also as the repositories of trauma within the socio-political milieu in Kashmir. Now, drawing from the nuanced frameworks of trauma and affect, I try to employ an interdisciplinary lens that integrates ethnomusicology, cultural studies, and critical theory. By scrutinizing select Kashmiri songs, I'll illuminate how the affective dimensions of music serve as powerful conduits for the expression and transmission of collective trauma, offering a unique lens through which to understand the enduring impact of the political unrest in Kashmiri society. The paper also looks at the category of the sentinel musician, as proposed by K. Kaufman-Chalamet, to analyze the role of the contemporary musicians in Kashmir. The concept of the sentinel musician posits that musicians are not merely performers, but active participants with an elevated awareness of social dynamics. Chalamet posits the role of a musician in the society as that of a moral leader, while at some other place, Attali refers to the musician as a prophet. Now, among these various roles that a musician is supposed to or expected to perform, a musician moves well beyond the act of performance to exercising both initiative and agency within the society. Chalamet writes, and I quote, "I propose a neologism, sentinel musician, and will use this expression to designate a musician who has served his or her society with vigilance, drawn on heightened powers of perception and performance. A sentinel musician watches and listens with care, and at pivotal moments may offer warnings through his or her music and its performance." In light of this, I also seek to focus on the transformative agency and all the societal responsibilities assumed by musicians operating within the region, as well as their roles as important archival stakeholders. Now I'll try to look at music as the archive that I'm saying that it is. Music shares a complex relationship with the time and the context that it's produced in. Whereas certain compositions may elicit recollection of the past, others serve as mnemonic devices for the present experiences to be recalled in the future. In the context of Chinese cultural revolutions, for example, specific songs called Zandi Zinj, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but they literally translate as the new songs of the battlefield. They engender a nostalgic sentiment, takes its listeners to a time in the past. But conversely, in the contemporary conflict zones, such as Kashmir, where the impact of traumatic events persists and the medical conditions such as the post-traumatic stress disorder are pertinent, songs assume an archival role rather than generating a general sense of nostalgia. The archival essence embedded in these songs becomes evident through the creation of contemporary musicians contributing to the new age music industry. Notably, Roshan Elahi is also known as by the stage name of MC Cash. He started his journey into rap music and songwriting after the turbulent events of 2010. And in his musical composition, I Protest, Cash pays homage to the dead individually by commemorating each one. So he names all the people who were dead by the time he started writing that name. So that is included in the lyrics of the song. Now, this combination of remembrance infused with protest is what Paul calls a powerful testimonial to the Kashmiri suffering that shapes its politics today. Another significant piece titled Remember 13th of July by Cash delves into historical narratives, constructing a musical archive that reflects on the 22 individuals shot dead during the Dogra rule while peacefully reciting the call for prayer. These individuals had gathered outside the Srinagar central jail to protest the death sentence of Abdul Qadir, a sympathizer of Kashmiri's struggle against the Dogra. Now, this historical sale of Kashmir, along with its land and people, to the Dogras is also well recorded in the song. Cash narrates, the whole story in a hip hop style when he writes, and I quote, "Our history will remind us, our history will inspire us, our history will define us, and our history will guide us. It's not a simple story when it comes from the heart. It's about Abdul Qadir and him approaching the dark. Word on the streets, Kashmiris had to play their part. The beginning to the end of oppression had to start. With the cry of revolution, they assembled near the jail, knowing Abdul Qadir was with the hangman and the whale. They cried for more people, and they ran and they came. Death came too, leaving a few to tell the tale. The army of the Maharaja had no guts, had no soul. They fired at people, left them dead, left them cold. They're fighting for their rights, a simple prose must be told. Kashmir was so cheaply was it sold. Remember the 13th of July. Now, in addition to MC Cash, there are several other, rap artists, Ahmad Javed, SXR, Tufail, SOS, Kafila, and numerous other rap artists who encapsulate their emotional distress within the fabric of their artistic expressions. Historically, as we know, hip-hop has functioned as a medium of dissent. So considering the genre's historical trajectory, it is unsurprising that hip-hop also serves as an analogous platform for Kashmiris endeavoring to articulate their experiences of suffering and trauma. Consequently, Cash and his contemporaries harnessed the power of hip-hop to illuminate the quotidian challenges associated with leading an existence fraught with uncertainty. I will now come to the spaces that these songs predominantly and surprisingly exist. Kashmiris have sought to redefine their long-standing modes of dissent through the lens of affective politics, as Zia notes. Various acts of dissent, ranging from the monthly sit-ins for the relatives of the disappeared from Kashmir over the last 3 decades, to the songs that are under consideration here, they all constitute forms of resistance enacted as counterspectacles, possessing just enough agency to contest prevailing narratives. Anthropologist Atharzia, in her analysis of women's activism in Kashmir, attributes this agency to a seemingly apolitical stance, which she characterizes the most political stance that one can take. Examining a seemingly apolitical space, such as a wedding, reveals the intricate dynamics of dissent. Songs, a vital element in weddings worldwide, also play a significant role in Kashmiri weddings. Zia, while accompanying an association of parents of disappeared persons member to a local wedding in Kashmir, observes how customary songs, called as One in Kashmiri, gradually transform into Mujahid birth, which were the songs dedicated to the remembrance of the disappeared. This exemplifies an instance of, and I quote Zia, memory gushing out of the unlikeliest of places. Traditional Kashmiri songs like One thus transcend their conventional roles as sources of enjoyment and entertainment, assuming the responsibility of memory preservation. Given that these spaces are predominantly occupied by women, the task of memorialization within such contexts especially falls on the shoulders of women. This also underscores the unique role that women play in preserving and transmitting collective memory within the socio-cultural fabric of Kashmir. Blurring the boundaries between celebration and mourning, these songs acquire the stature of what Scott would call hidden transcript, attempting to subvert domination. The next section is titled The More the Merrier, where I discuss some music videos that sometimes are also released with these songs. The cultural revolution that unfolded in post-2008 Kashmir brought art to the forefront, manifesting across various genres. Notably, poetry emerged as a prevalent medium of expression. While poetry and songs essentially convey similar sentiments, the inclusion of musical compositions amplify the emotive impact beyond what words alone can achieve. Although robust poetic narratives with heightened emotions abound, the incorporation of musical instruments enhances the memorability of these songs. Zarif Ahmed Zarif underscores the significance of rhythm to the essence of Kashmiriyat, attributing it to the region's musical heritage. Furthermore, a substantial portion of these songs is accompanied by music videos upon release. Now, the incorporation of visual imagery augments the production of affect rendering the combination as an even more potent form of expression. This also produces a platform for other artists, artistic forms such as the graphic art and mural arts, illustrations to be seen. According to Shelley Walia, any negotiation with the march of history will foreground art as a consequence of cultural patterns and trends in cultural politics. It is difficult, however, to distinguish between thought and feeling, as the amalgamation of words and music, color and movement broaden human experience even when words fall short. Now, a predominant theme, which we'll see encapsulated in these video songs, revolve around the profound loss of loved ones. These musical compositions serve as lamentations for the departed and portray the tribulations faced by those who remain among the living. Notably, elderly women, frequently the mothers of the young boys who have died, assume a central role in these poignant depictions. In a particularly emotive composition by Ishfaq Kawa titled Nundbane, a grieving mother addresses her deceased son, expressing how his absence has irrevocably created a void in his life. She seeks the knowledge of his resting place beneath the soil, longing to be reunited with him. The music video is also accompanied, that accompanies the song, has an emotional impact because it illustrates the mother having vivid, imaginations and visualizations of her son in every young person that she sees. So this definitely adds layers of affective depth to the depiction of loss, underscoring a profound emotional resonance embedded within the narrative. And the lyrics go somewhat like, Lalwin se majit harvit umran se daag khaytya yikhna balai laghai nundbani yar myane gubro nender sutrevit mistel katan mevantam laran butur vatai nundbani yar myane, which loosely translates it as the mother is asking, telling the son that he has left her and, he's left her eternal misery to bear. And she would, want to know where he's lying under the earth. And she would, if she knows that, she'll come rushing to him and, be there with him. Another composition resonating with these poignant emotions is Lal Nawat by the renowned musician and performer Mohammad, known by the artist name Alif. This composition serves as a profound expression of mourning, and it was honored with the 8th Dada Saheb Phalke Film Festival in 2018 in Delhi. In the accompanying music video, Munim is portrayed in a state of deep mourning. He laments not only the departure of a loved one, but it also seems to mourn the demise of his aspirations, the dreams that he endeavors to sustain amidst the challenging political climate of his homeland. In a poignant visual metaphor, Munim implores the departed to return, creating an evocative image of cradling them. The symbolism of the cradle, typically associated with new life, is deconstructed in Munim's portrayal as he is seen cradling a coffin. This act, which conventionally signifies the beginning of life, the cradle signifies the beginning of life, takes on a somber connotation in Munim's world, symbolizing only death and loss. This juxtaposition of this powerful imagery underscores the profound impact of grief and the struggle to preserve dreams amidst the challenging political realities of the race. The next section is titled Trauma is What Trauma Does. I'll briefly go through it. Trauma theorist Bessel van der Kolk, in his seminal work, The Body Keeps the Score, elucidates the profound ramifications of trauma on sensory perception. He extensively explores therapeutic modalities involving art and music, contending, and I quote, the capacity of art, music, and dance to circumvent the speechlessness that accompanies terror may be one reason they are employed as trauma treatments across various cultures worldwide. Consequently, music, operating as a sensory medium, possesses the capacity to elicit and navigate the intricate emotional terrains intertwined with traumatic experiences and helps fight the speechlessness. This everyday speechlessness imposed on Kashmiris also finds an outlet in this music. It acts as an oppositional speech act, I'm using Johnston here, with the dual purpose of constructing collective memory and serving as a cathartic expression. The songs also generate an affective response in their listeners, resulting in a sense of solidarity and serve as catalysts for the emergence of an infra-political resistance. The resistance, though unorganized, takes shape through the shared experiences and sentiments conveyed in music, allowing for a subtle yet potent form of opposition against the prevailing socio-political direction set by this. In the face of imposed constraints in daily life, particularly among the youth, the concept of orthopraxy by Scott becomes pertinent. The youth, compelled to navigate their existence within the boundaries delineated by the state, engage in a form of orthopractic resistance through their art. The act of creating and consuming this music becomes a survival instinct, a means through which the younger generation asserts their agency and resilience against the constraints imposed upon them. I have a couple more sections, but I'll come to the music, the section where I talk about the musical past and why music serves as a potent medium for Kashmiris in particular. Kashmir's historical narrative is inherently imbued with musicality, and consequently, it's only natural that expressions of dissent within the region have manifested through musical avenues only. The societal evolution of Kashmir, marked by fluid transformation through numerous religious mass conversions over centuries, has nonetheless retained certain enduring features, music being one of them. Owing to its Brahminical roots, music in Kashmir survived through bhajans. The advent of Islam in the 14th century, brought about by Sayyid Mir Ali Hamdani of Iran, witnessed a transformation in the musical landscape, with Sufiana music becoming an integral part of Kashmir's version of Islam. Shaped by its diverse cultural influences, encompassing both Brahminical and Sufi Islamic traditions, Kashmir showcased a rich array of poetic narrations in the late 18th century, often presented through sung or performed expressions. Prominent examples include, Lalded's Vach, Nundresh's Shrik, Chitralekha Zuchi in her exploration
Please
of
try
the
to wind up in 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll skip a bit. Now, musical traditions in Kashmir survived over time through performative arts like Band and Ladisha. Band Pathar, a form of performative art combined drama, poetry, singing, and dance, served as cultural archives during different historical epochs, including the Mughal, the Dogra, and the British periods. Band, as a performative art form, tackles a spectrum of social and political issues, thereby establishing itself as a repository of collective memory and a crucial component of oral history. Notably, one variant of Band Pathar, specifically designated as the Angrez Pathar, delves into the historical epoch marked by British rule in Kashmir. And then there's another form, it's called Raza Pathar. It would be another form of Band Pathar, resurfacing memories of the alien Afghan rule in Kashmir. So in parallel, Ladisha, which is also a dying musical form in Kashmir, it involves a performer delivering lyrics in a distinctive tone. So historically, Ladisha also has played a pivotal role in disseminating information and providing a platform for alternate dissent. Serving as a social mirror, Ladisha carried information in an era devoid of social media. Kashmir then, throughout history, has employed music as a means of expressing dissent in its constant struggle against foreign invasion and tyranny. For example, the following Ladisha lyrics look back at the historical event of the sale of Kashmir to Dogra through the infamous treaty of Amritsar. The lyrics go like, Dogra mulke Kashmir. Dogras have bought the nation of Kashmir. So this is the past that we can trace. Should I end it here, or can I have 1 more minute to conclude?
I suppose, Sana, you should stop here because we have a lot of questions for you. So that will take.
Sure. I'll stop.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sana, for that really thought-provoking presentation. I think you've really given us a lot to wonder about. So my question to you is, do you think when we talk about musicians, especially in the current age, do you think their reach is also important as to how many people are listening to these songs? And is that an important factor when we think about music that is talking about revolution, music that is talking about people's pain? And secondly, what about maintaining sonic archives? Because when you put it out on the internet has a quality that it will never forget. But what about the content that such poetry, such music brings about? What about then? So if you could elaborate on these two.
It's interesting that you point that out, Jubi, because most of these songs, when put on the YouTube by the artists themselves, have been put down.
Yeah.
They're not on the internet. Of course, many different versions from fan accounts exist, but the actual songs have definitely been, brought down from the YouTube. So there's an alternate, existence of these. So the actual audience for this kind of music is specifically the youth. And it is heartening to see that most of the youth is active participant, active consumers of this music. And what is very interesting is that most of the music that has been written not in the context of conflict, but were basically romantic songs, let us say, have also been, they also are looked in the through via the lens of conflict now. So the beloved that was there is now the beloved Kashmir. So, songs have started changing meanings for people, who would listen to it. Now they mean completely different to them. So we of course want, they mean what we want them to mean. So
Yeah.
they're definitely changing meanings and usage now.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we have one more question. Yeah, Aqib.
Sure, Sana. So there are a total of 3 questions and a comment. I'll read them all at once. Please take note of them and see how much you can respond to that, because I don't think you have more than 3 minutes. Yeah. So this is a comment from one of your teachers from your school, perhaps. I have asked her a lot and more than that as her teacher. This comes with a smile. But today, a comment about her work. The work she has presented, as she herself mentioned, has social, emotional, and mental ramifications. It verily has a semblance with my work in the Department of Education, which focuses on social emotional learning and grooming of the young learners. We have an opportunity to co-work on a theme on the same lines. This is from Ramiz Ahmed. So that's a comment. And question then, this is a question from an unnamed participant. Do you think any form of art, whether music or literature, is enough to depict the political situation in Kashmir or anywhere else for that matter? That's the first question. Then second question is from Dr. Huzaifa Pandit.
Can I take only one, because I'll forget?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So is art enough, or is music enough? Definitely not. I mean, it's not enough to, if you want to learn about any conflict zone or any history for that matter, the cultural production should not be the, it cannot be the only place you look at. Definitely alongside political debate and the historical analysis, it does become imperative that you also look at the cultural productions, because you will definitely be getting various perspectives as far as the history is concerned, because whoever rules owns the history. So history will also have different perspectives coming from times past. So cultural productions definitely help you take a stance. So both of the things are important, the political and the historical analysis, but it's very important to carve out a space for the evidence that is present in the cultural production as well. I hope that.
Thank you, Sana. Jubi, what do you say? Shall we move on, and I'll send these questions to you, Sana, so that you can respond?
Yeah, she can answer them in the chat, no? I think that's...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sana, for your presentation. We'll now move on to the next presenter. We have Sanjukta Roy, who is a PhD scholar of English literature at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Roorkee. She has completed her BA from the Department of English, Durgapur Women's College, Burdwan University, and got her MA from Qazi Nazrul University. Her areas of research interest include memory studies, cultural studies, South Asian literature, migration. And we also have Binod Mishra, who is a professor of English at IIT Roorkee, who has served in various reputed institutions. He has published 24 books, 18 edited and 6 authored on various English language and literature aspects. He has received several prestigious awards in the field of literary studies. Their paper title is Remembering and Forgetting War Memory in Naomi Munawwira's Island of a Thousand Mirrors. So over to you, Sanjukta.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and obviously thank you to all the organizers to be so kind and gracious enough to give this platform. This is a working paper. I am still developing and trying to attune this paper as per the suggestions and feedback that I gather from here as well. So my paper is titled Remembering and Forgetting War Memory in Naomi Munawwira's Island of a Thousand Mirrors. So let me begin by a brief overview of my presentation. So this will be the brief outline, and I'll go through parts of my paper and the excerpts that is pertinent to this research paper. So to begin with, I would like to draw all of your attention to the epigraph of the novel that has been like put forward by the authoress. In the epigraph of Island of a Thousand Mirrors, it's a quote from Milan Kundera's The Book of Laughter and Forgetting. There it states the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. There lies a strong undertone of the complexity of memory and forgetting implemented in this novel of factionalism, nationalism, war, and subjectivity, which has motivated me into critically reading this text through this idea of Viet Thanh Nguyen's seminal work of Vietnam and the Memory of War, Nothing Ever Dies. And it talks about the expansive memory, ethical forgetting, and remembrance in war memories, particularly. To understand and expand on war memory, this paper will borrow the idea of just memory from Viet Thanh Nguyen's seminal work titled Nothing Ever Dies, Vietnam and the Memory of War. Nguyen tries to introduce the concept of just memory, acknowledging the vilified reality of both parties involved in a war. This paper attempts to contextualize both ethical remembering and ethical forgetting in war memories to acquire a just memory devoid of the politicized reality. Alongside the elusiveness of war memory and its ethical relevance in commemoration, this paper will explicate the significance of transcultural memory, temporal variance, and trauma in shaping personal and collective memory and identity beyond the recorded history. So I'll quickly begin the literary background of the author and the book that I have chosen. Naomi Munawira is a Sri Lankan-born American writer of the novel Island of the Thousand Mirrors. It's a debut novel written in South Asian contemporary genre. She was born in 1973 in Sri Lanka and along with her family moved to Nigeria 3 years later to avoid the civil unrest therein. However, after 1984, they also had to leave Nigeria facing similar unrest and they emigrated to United States, Los Angeles, when Naomi was only 12. So the novel setting is in Sri Lanka's history ranging from the official independence in 1948 and it moves on from 1983 to 2009 of civil war with and ends with the overrunning of the LTTE insurgent or militant group after the final killing of the leader Vellupillai Prabhakaran by the Sri Lankan government. The long and tedious civil war stretched out into dark history of war casualties from both Sinhala and Tamil communities, ultimately witnessing its bleak end with an approximate count of almost 80,000 death casualties. Munawira has divided this novel into two narrations. One by Yashodhara Rajasinghe, a Sinhala woman, and another by Saraswati, a Tamil militant woman. Both these characters represent opposite poles of society, nationality, and individuality in their disparate voices and life choices. Initially, the story progresses with Yashodhara introducing her father when he was a 7-year-old child living in an impoverished locality at Hikkaduwa town in Sri Lanka to an Ayurvedic doctor father and Beatrice Muriel, a village school teacher, and how he grows up to be a guilt-stricken and browbeaten doctor. Gradually, the narration unfolds towards Yashodhara's mother, Vishakha Sujata Rana Singhe's history of childhood and how she has grown up in an affluent family, thereby in a well-awed cottage in Colombo. This is an important space that has been talked about throughout the novel. As the novel progresses, deep undercurrents of emotional, racial, and national animosity and violence become widely evident. The novel has the themed ideologue of community disharmony documented and embroiled in small but significant images and incidents. One of such an incident is the riot instigated and stimulated by the Sinhala communities who wanted to kill, rape, and plunder Tamil households and families resentful of their settlement in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and their fanatic extremist hatred against them for apparently stealing the mainlanders' opportunities. This incident saw extreme violence and inhuman slaughtering, and on the personal image, Mala and Anuradha's empathy and the subsequent tragedy to preserve humanitarian goal over communal hatred. Mala is the aunt of Yashodhara Rajasinghe and Nishant's sister. She has always been the rebel with a strong past of female subjectivity. This incident leaves Mala widowed and childless, but more traumatized by the grotesque demonic atrocity that those Sinhalese exercised upon Tamils, and how that stoked the fire for the future militancy and separatist factionalism in the Tamil community. The vulnerable victims at the massacre. Here I'll quote Munawira's idea of this war trauma that is being depicted in the memory of Mala. Arteries, streams, and then rivers of Tamils flows out of the city. Behind them, they leave looted, soot-blackened houses, the unburied or unburnt bodies of loved ones, ancestral wealth, lost children, belonging, and nationalism. It's a list that stays bitter on the tongue, giving birth to fantasies of retribution, partition, secession. They flee to ancestral villages abandoned decades ago. And it is in these northern places that the events of that July will make them the most militant and determined of separatists. Here, the July that is being quoted is the July 1983, which starts the civil unrest and the civil war thereby, which ends in 2009. Now, I'll try to discuss briefly these three ideas that I have taken in the paper in understanding this problem of trauma and memory and remembrance and forgetting. So first, I'll try to talk about Karut's idea of psychic trauma as a wound inflicted upon the mind that breaks the victim's experience of time, self, and the world that caused great emotional anguish in that individual. The traumatic experiences profoundly alter the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about other people, and the way we make sense of the world. The person under trauma goes through intrusive re-experiencing those non-verbalized memories, not really remembering, but rather reliving. This is continuously a recurrent image in this novel, which talks about the reliving of those memories that the participants in the war and the trauma tries to forget radically, and yet it gets resurfaced again and again as they go on throughout the novel. Next, we find Vietha Nguyen's critique and seminal essay titled Nothing Ever Dies, Vietnam and the Memory of War, where he writes about the memory of war and the concept of just memory, which is an approach towards acknowledging the vilified reality of both the party in a war. This paints a picture which rightly states a critique of the valorized idea of war, departing from the traditional idea associated with war ethics that conventionally shows a blurred and biased picture in favor of the atrocity and valorization of the particular national sentiments. Nguyen guides his idea on the basis of ethical forgetting, along with ethical memory. According to his approach, while ethical memory demands of people to realize the inherent propensity in men of possessing and exercising the vice and the virtue through forgetting, he talks about the selective memory. As part of a political and nationalistic endeavor, this trait of forgetting points out the innate war memory, lacuna, or the absence therein, whereby one section of the war is victimized and valorized at the cost of forgetting the other. Nguyen suggests all wars are fought twice, the first time on the battlefield, the second time in memory. Thus, the memory of war can never be selective and complicit in being politicized. Munawira, through this novel, essentially does that. Her relaying of the events is never colored by any sort of biased sensibility, and the authorial intent is one being authentic to the narratorial and historical processes. She designates equal virtue and vice, and the villainy and humanity are portrayed unequivocally in case of the two factions at war. Finally, we will talk about the gendered forgetting in just memory, the idea that is used by Chris Coulter in his work Swati Parashar's South Asian fiction about war militants in Kashmir and Sri Lankan women militants especially, and Munawira's this fiction as well. So acts of remembering differs from other acts of mental representation in that they denote the absent as past. Now, when we talk about gendered forgetting, we have to take into consideration the remembrances and the memories of women identities and women migrants and women communities that are being decimated or that are not being given their relevant remembrance and relevant commemoration. Mala, that I have already spoken about, the character, had lost her Sinhala husband, Anuradha, who had tried to disarm an angry mob to rescue a Tamil boy. The mob, intoxicated with wrath and nationalistic jingoism, didn't flinch even once to break his skull open since he tried to safeguard a Tamil boy. Mala was saved by Purnam, her Tamil house help, and Alvis, a coconut plucker, and she delivers a stillborn child. The gruesome images of Tamil women ravaged and burned, and their similitude to animal flesh burned at a Muslim feast are just horrors and terrors that Mala witnessed, and it scarred her for life since she felt how beastly human hatred can be. These are the metaphorical images that the author has used to talk about the gendered violence and atrocities that are never been spoken about in the official documents and records thereby. And I quote from the novel, "A roar of delight drowns the woman's screams. Then again, the sound of gushing petrol. The scent is rising again. The thick fragrance of charred flesh, like that which wafts from the Muslim quarter during Eid. The festive roasting of animal flesh." Naomi Munawira tries to project an unambiguous pacifist approach in her novel about war, communal factionalism, exile, and belonging. According to her, war victims and survivors, irrespective of the side they belong to, face similar, if not more, misery and trauma, and the memory attached to it remains gory and biased in both parts of the war narrative. The common enemy, according to the author, as well as for Yashodhara, her mouthpiece, is war and hatred. And the victims are never the powerful hierarchical chiefs, but the common people like Saraswati, who had to face the physical abuse and violation at the hands of the Sinhalese militants and army soldiers just for the hate, or Lanka Rajasinghe, who had to die in a bomb blast by the LTTE militants. This is evident in the quote by Saraswati the day she joins the LTTE camp. But the memory of a bullet-ridden cement walls, a perfect square of sky, reminds me that hatred is real, and that between us and them, it is the only thing. This common enemy is the part where Saraswati, a 17-year-old child who bore the dream of being a school teacher, finds resonance. She gets violated by the Sinhala soldiers in the name of communal hatred. For her, war is something huge with a pointed tongue and wicked claws. When the tanks rumble past in the far field, I feel it breathe. When the air strikes start and the blood flows, I feel it licks its lips. War trauma and remembering and ethical forgetting gets reverberated throughout this novel as Munawira talks about the peace treaty that goes after the end of the war. So the President Mahinda asserts that I don't want to dig into the past. I don't want to open this wound. He tries to politicize the memory. He tries to evade this idea and the vicious history thereby, as he he tries to like manipulate the memory of the politicized reality. But Yashodhara, on the other hand, talks about the self and the other when she asserts, I dream of the 80,000 who did not live into this moment. Those who were left behind in the lagoons and the paddy fields, in the cement jail cells, in the white vans beneath the rolling waves of the ocean. Those who were shattered in bomb blasts, those who were bludgeoned, those who were taken in the midst of giving speeches, those who were taken from their beds in the night, those who were called to strap bombs on and detonate themselves. I dream the one that I can give a name to, my sister Lanka, Rajasinghi, and that other, her unnamed, unloved assassin. 80,000. It's a number beyond comprehension. I must mourn for them. So here we talk about the genocide that's not being claimed by the government records. With this excerpt, we see the acknowledgement of both the self and the other in remembering, which goes into an anticipation of a future of amicable unity and peace beyond the jingoistic ethnic and racial hatred. Yashodhara wants to see her daughter Samudra, who is both of Tamil and Sinhala descent from her mother and father's side, find that unison in their peaceful future born out of a traumatic past. In this constellation, the present and the future are linked in a probabilistic relation, as Kozilek has coined bundles of possibility. The insights help to apprehend how all temporality of memory underline a process of continuous historicization. The past is retained, radically forgotten, and resurfaced through such narrative, mnemonics, and cultural revivals in literature and language. Thus, when Yashodhara calls for a radical forgetting by the end of the novel to evade the trauma and evils of their common historical and personal memory, he knows the imminent reconciliation of her daughter to her generational trauma and memory is inevitable. Thus, she culminates her peace monologue after the war is over officially. The day is coming, I think, when I will share with my child the ocean she was named after. I shall show her the island. I shall take her into the country, but it is the ocean that I long to show her most of all. She is the child of peace. The many disparate parts of her experience knit together in jumbled but peaceable unity. The waves lick away her footsteps, the sand retaining no record of what came before her. So, next, I'll talk
Sanjukta, your
about
time is
war,
about
trauma, identity briefly.
Sanjukta, can you
Okay,
hear
okay,
me?
I'll skip past
About,
and I'll
yeah, please
come to that.
try to wind up in 1
Yes,
minute.
yes, yeah, I'll come to that. Yeah. I'll briefly conclude by saying that in this novel, as Heidegger has put forth the idea of being and becoming, we see a gradual world to unfold in both Yashodhara and Saraswati's dual but opposite territories in forming. Yashodhara, in her exile from the island in America with her family, grows up to be a woman of words, studying literature, finding peace, and then conflict in marriage, but her innate nature dwells within her long-lost island memories. However, as she returns to Sri Lanka, she realizes the ephemeral nature of her being, and losing her sister to war, she, with her partner Shiva and daughter Samudra, settles in San Francisco away from her innate familiarity. Saraswati shows her resistance, vulnerability, and heroism through her initial struggle as a vulnerable Tamil civilian struggling her way out in a war-torn land to become a woman who aspired to study and teach. However, her eventual fate in being ravaged brutally by Sinhalese army, circumstances leading her to militancy and insurgency, ultimately her end by being a suicide bomber, shows another traumatic response. So as Karuth and trauma theorists state, memory and trauma has their definitive misalignment, which is what is protracted in these characters through transcultural remembrance and forgetting. We see a complicit memory or just memory reified by Munawir. Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you, Sanjukta, for that amazing presentation. I think you've brought forth fascinating terms that we would all like much more elaboration on. So my question to you is, since this novel has two women, are they remembering the same conflict very differently in terms of how they have been affected, right? And then does that also mean that in their memory there is some kind of binary that is being formed as to who is more affected in such a conflict, who gets to move away from the conflict and make their life very differently? And then do we get to characterize their memories as ethical remembering? How does ethical remembering then become a part of this kind of memory project, I would say? So yeah.
Thank you for the question. And it's what's the basis of this paper is like I am talking about two women from a polar opposite social, cultural, and economic variance. But when their memory gets conflicted in this war zone, Yashodhara Rajasinghe has an ethical remembering because she is taking into consideration Saraswati, the suicide bomber's ideology and the personal conflict and the personal trauma as well when she is trying to remember her own sister's loss in that bomb attack. But Saraswati has had her own share of struggle because she had been raped by the Sinhalese soldiers. So she can't be impartial about her trauma being induced upon her and how, and she had dealt with that by joining the forces in the militants. So I would say that ethical remembering is there in the context of the author and the Sinhala community mouthpiece, that is Yashodhara Rajasinghe. But from the Tamil perspective, obviously they have been victimized throughout the novel. So there has some amount of partial ideologies there because of the constant ramifications that they had to face.
Right. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions? Aqib?
I'm afraid we don't have any other questions, and also we have overshot time, so maybe it is time to wind up the session.
Right. That's okay. Thank you so much to all the presenters who have presented their papers today. It has been really a fascinating session to hear all of you and to have this kind of a discussion where we are talking about memories and resistance in this way. I want to thank the moderator, Aqib, and also the rapporteur, Reshma, and a lot of thanks to the organizers themselves. I feel we will now meet for the keynote at 2:15, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, Jubi, before we all leave, I would request all the presenters to kindly switch on their camera if possible. We'll just quickly take a screenshot or photograph. Yeah. Thank you. I think we are done. We'll meet everyone again for the keynote session after the lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you.